media. All right, so we've come to the main event for the evening, and I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce to you Joe Feyereisen. So Joe is a senior partner at AZAI USA, which is an artificial intelligence consulting firm based actually here in Phoenix. He has a very storied career for sure, 35 years as C-suite executive consultant and entrepreneur. And he's helped multiple international, he's achieved multiple international awards and patents in banking, real estate, healthcare, energy, and public sectors. His solutions have helped businesses generate billions in new revenue opportunity while saving hundreds of millions through efficiencies and better analysis of data. And he helps businesses develop plans to adeptly implement and leverage the power of AI. And I could tell you from the run through we did earlier in the week, it's a really fascinating presentation. And it's certainly something very interesting to me. As you folks know, I'm in cybersecurity, and there's a lot of AI in cybersecurity, or claims to be helping cybersecurity, some of which is smoke and mirrors, I think. And I think part of it is down to this actual issue, which is this data bias. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Joe. So I'm going to stop sharing. Joe, you want to take over and drive from here? Thanks so much and welcome.
Thanks, Simon. Let me hit the share screen button. That's showing up to everybody?
Yep.
All right.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Well, thank you for the honor, Simon and company, for letting me get a chance to meet you guys, talk a little bit about probably one of the most interesting parts of the burgeoning AI field, which is AI bias. So as Alfred E. Newman used to say, bias, what bias? So we have a number of phrases up there where it just goes to show that all of us, whether we're right or whether we're wrong, has some kind of bias. And yes, I know the color taupe is not salmon, but you know, when we grow up, where we live, who we learn from, our religion, our education, all those things, our neighborhood, all have a make us think a certain way. And it's not always a bad thing, but we'll talk about how you have to just kind of look out for it a little bit in terms of AI, because AI can take a small problem and make it really, really bad. And we'll kind of go over that. So tonight we'll talk a little bit about what is AI bias. I'll give you guys a couple of real life examples. I've been doing this for a long time, so we'll give you 3 or 4 real life examples. A little exercise, so we'll do a spot the bias, little exercise on a real situation, and then just talk a little bit about best practices. What are some of the things you have to do to kind of make sure that you minimize the impact of bad data that creates the bias. The bias itself can happen anywhere. I'll preface by saying that the tools like TensorFlow, PyCore, the foundational parts, like if you're using AWS, you're using IBM, they're pretty neutral. They don't really, the problems around bias are going to occur in the actual project to take it from a raw part of data all the way to some kind of decision-making process downstream from there. So we'll talk about workflow bias, what we call raw input data bias. There's different names for these, and believe me, there's hundreds of places I could show you where bias could come in. Probably the most important bias, which is your algorithm bias. Who made the calculations and how is that taking data? And then the output. When you have that final data, who or what makes a decision from that data? And we'll talk a little bit about how that can also affect bias. So the first area that we'll kind of look at is one of the biggest companies in the world, and this is Amazon. And in 2018, they worked to build a very big project, and fortunately, the lawyers caught something in the middle of 2019, which prevented what it could have been a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit. And you go, well, how can Amazon, who's so far up with the AWS until make this happen? Well, Amazon gets approximately, and this is when I did the project back in 2018, but they get about 3 million resumes a month. And Amazon wanted to use their own AI engines to kind of sift the resumes to figure out who is the best shot at being a star in the organization. Like, and look at these resumes. Who's going to be somebody that's going to be worth our time, our money to invest in them? So what they wanted to do was compare millions of resumes over the lifespan of when Amazon started in the mid-90s to 2018. From there, identify who the top performers were. Find some commonalities and use that information to create a machine learning program in AI to search for that through all those resumes so it can come up with that top 5 or 10% every month to make the HR's job a lot easier. Well, here's the findings. It failed miserably. And let me tell you how. First off is fortunately, they caught it in the first 500,000 resumes. They anticipated to go over 20 million resumes in this, and they were able to catch it pretty quickly, which is a good thing. Of that, they were able to look at, from those 500,000 resumes, who were the 10 years, the first 10 years, who were the most successful candidates. They want to get kind of a baseline of what it takes in terms of skill sets and education to be that top person. But guess what? Think about 1996 when they got started. Who were the main employees? Well, the first employees, frankly, were over 95% white males. Most of them were in the Seattle area, so they were ex-Nintendo, ex-Microsoft type employees. And so they already based their resumes off of a small subset of eligible people because they were basing off of the people that were successful in the first round. Second thing is the algorithm they used kicked out women's colleges, women's hobbies, women's names. They found that a lot of women and a lot of minority names were kicked out because they went to colleges, they had names that were not in that first 500,000 or so resumes. So if you think about it, you build a machine learning thing saying, hey, here's the best capture I can of that data, but it doesn't have any other data. It was bereft of data of successful people in the organization. Here's the other part where the bias created a problem. It was biased towards the early employees. What did Amazon sell mostly in its first 7 years of business? Books. They were Barnes & Noble, Bookstar, Crocs and Bertano's kind of a Walden Books competitor online. They didn't, later on they got the Kindle, but the Kindle was still based around the books. They didn't sell groceries. They didn't sell AI. They didn't sell stereo systems or beach canopies for it. So the algorithm didn't take into consideration that the business model of Amazon also changed. So how do you find the skills and the right people on resumes that came in early when you had products or merchandises and supply chain management and things that changed so significantly later on, plus all the things that Amazon invented? They never thought about that as far as looking for who's the ideal person or persons that we want to work for us. So you can understand where this can become a legal issue because Amazon is trying to hire people and it's going to knock out people that could be eligible. And frankly, they could be sued for it very easily through a lot of the different programs out there for equal opportunity hiring, for gender bias, minority bias, things that weren't intended in the system, but they wanted to make sure of it. So fortunately, they got this figured out beforehand, but they were so far down as far as the work they had to just cut and stop the whole project to start over again because there's too much data had been calculated all the way through and they couldn't get it stopped on that. Now, when we look at AI, the most recent article I got today is there are over 2,147 different types of AI. And all of them are variations of different types, but basically the big piece that you're going to find here in Arizona are going to be around machine learning, which is what is something that is a process that can be repeatable? What's a repeated process that we're going to have a computer do versus a human do? We have data mining, which is how do I look and sift through information automatically. So it's still done with computers before, but it's done with older BI type programs. Natural language processing, and that fills two areas. It's both the typing of language and the interpretation and verbalization of language from a vocal standpoint. So when you call for tech support on Cox for your local cable, when it goes down twice a week, often you're going to get a voice in their end, and that voice, the first 1 or 2 rounds, it's basically using some type of NLP to try to analyze what is it you want to go, where does it want to forge to versus going to right to a human being. When you do a chat bot with a program or a bank or an insurance company, and you're entering information through the chat bot, it's actually using some kind of NLP for that. Image recognition. When I was a CIO for a number of international government hospitals and healthcare organizations, right? We want to use image recognition for discerning perhaps where in the body there's an anomaly. I'm looking at an organ. How can I use image recognition AI as a way to minimize things? We did a lot of work with autism out in India, and we could find out synapses in the brain that weren't firing right, and we could look and see quickly if it was in certain sections of the brain where the autism and what kind of probable skills and efficiencies that person might have based upon where it wasn't working properly. IoT, Internet of Things. Everything from street lights to your Fitbit smartwatch to your coffee maker are beginning to use the internet, beginning to use some level of AI to make decisions, whether it's just turning on and turning off for you, and then learning what temperature you want the room to be at to something more sophisticated. And then the get all, be all of AI is the stuff you see in sci-fi flicks, the cognition, the self-awareness, where it begins to learn and live and begins to generate emotions. And a lot of that kind of stuff in there, all those are going to have a lot of areas where bias can be of a concern for you. So I said earlier, the most popular ways right now that AI are being used here in Arizona is really under the personal assistance. So this is your chatbots. This is some basic machine learning. It's around natural language processing, whether you're typing in or saying it, and using rules. And there's both loose rules. Loose rules are the more you want it to learn on itself, and rigid rules where you tell it when you can learn and when you can't vary from that. Understanding where those lines are drawn when you develop in the project, developing the software to begin with can be very important to that. And of course, having the right vocabulary dictionary. In the medical world, your vocabulary for some of the words and terms for somebody that say who's a gynecologist will have some of the same words as somebody who's a cardiologist, but it means something different, or it's got a different context to it. So understanding some of those things before you build them can help you kind of reduce some of the biases that are on there. So basically, there's 4 areas we talk about where bias can kind of enter. The first thing is that data gathering. What's my source of raw data? Am I getting it from one source? Is it everything? Has it been filtered? What is that data I could have? Second is the workflow of the process, which is where I find probably the most errors occur. But like when you do a project plan to build a piece of software or roll out a piece of infrastructure or develop some kind of solution for your end users, what's the workflow? Because every step along the way, is there a decision that has to be made? What's the consequences of that decision? Who makes a decision? And what's the effect if it goes bad? And you have the algorithm, right? So now we're going to program in our whatever language we want to do this in, something to do the work for us. And we want to make sure that it's not like Amazon.com, where the algorithm itself actually has some limitations or some built-in bias, or sometimes not enough bias. And we want to make sure that the algorithm is done properly. And then finally is the output. Is the data that gets generated from the algorithm, is that data used for another device or another workflow to make more decisions off of, and another path it has to go? Is the human involved anywhere in there? We want to understand from that, because that data can help you make the wrong decision or the right decision, and that can affect not just your job, but the life. And we'll talk about a little bit here how number 4 can actually affect thousands of people's lives right here in Arizona. So let's kind of take one of the first real projects. Over the last 6 years, I've done a lot of consulting work for the states of Texas, Oregon, and Idaho, primarily in the rural healthcare area. And because it's a very expensive, very hard to get at population for these big states that have 70, 80% of the land mass is all rural. You may have a couple, one or two big towns, but big. So we want to focus on how do we reduce the cost and frequency of somebody going back to the ER? So assume you had a heart bypass or you had a serious chronic illness or injury or some kind of pre-existing condition. We know that if you have to get readmitted back to the hospital, depending upon where you were in rural Texas or Oregon, it could cost the insurance company or the state Medicare or Medicaid as much as $25,000 per patient. Well, new rules occurred in the last 4 years. It also said if that patient gets readmitted with the same problem back to the hospital within 90 days, the state or the hospital has to eat the cost, or the insurance company, based upon. So the patient doesn't have to pay for it, but somebody is going to eat that cost. And so the states want to kind of discover if there's a way to use technology to kind of prevent the ER readmissions. So we developed a telehealth application that would interface with 300 medical applications, would let 10,000 biomedical and fitness and wellness devices interface through your cell phone back to those applications. So such as a smartwatch and a wireless scale and a number of Bluetooth devices, even exercise machines. And we mix those with some exercise and treatment plans and AI workflows. And so the AI's job in this situation was to actually monitor and determine if a predictive or prescriptive interjection was needed. So are we seeing a trend of blood pressure or A1Cs or blood sugars going at a certain level, or we better either inject somebody over the phone right away, stop by the house, but something to prevent having to call the ambulance or the helicopter to fly that person into a rural hospital or to a big city hospital. And so this data would be transmitted securely from the cell phone to what they call a healthcare information exchange, where different types of approved caregivers could have access to the parts data they had to see. So you can see here, there were quite a few number of caregivers for every patient. Here, as many as 2, 4, 6, is 8 or 9 caregivers. And so you want to make sure that they're getting the right information, not to panic, but also not to come in too late when something comes through. So with a telehealth thing, so where's area to look at for this were the compliance bias. How do we know that the actual patient was actually using the system? And I'll give you one example. In a lot of rural Oregon, a lot of the families there don't even have internet. So unless your cell phone has access somewhere, so a lot of the people weren't real familiar with some of these new tools that we see all the day living here in the Phoenix area. So a 75-year-old man with blood pressure issues didn't want to wear a smartwatch, or he let the battery die before recharging it. Or in a couple of cases here, he gave the smartwatch to his granddaughter because she was practicing for a 10K run for her high school. And that data, we don't know who's walking, who's running. So we have to make sure as far as this bias, so we don't accept the figures as the rote or as truth, because they may have been generated uniquely. So we look not just at the compliance that they're using it, but also at the frequency. And then from there, create an algorithm to say, okay, it's not normal for somebody to have 6 miles in one day in 1 hour add to our Fitbit, and be able to create that in there. Second is the calibration. If any of you guys have any kind of Bluetooth device, let's just take a set of Apple earbuds. I think we all know that version 1 to version 2, there's a big difference in the range and the sound quality. Well, you get the same thing now. Think about that for a blood pressure meter. We would find that version 1 to version 2 of one brand of a blood meter or a diabetes meter could be have to be readjusted. Even based on the cell phone, sometimes newer devices transmit on newer versions of Bluetooth, like Bluetooth 3 to Bluetooth 4. Their device couldn't handle it. Most of these people had free devices that came from the state of Oregon or state of Texas or from the state of Idaho. So we got to make sure that there's a system in the back end that we can make sure that calibration's there. You don't want to get the wrong blood sugar numbers or the wrong weight on them. You're making decisions based off of that kind of, and the machines all work, they just weren't calibrated properly. Frequency bias was one way I look at too. So what happens if a patient does the exercises, but he does them 1 hour later every day? Well, we know from talking to literally thousands of doctors and exercise experts that taking your medication or doing exercise at different times of the day, your body's going to have less ability to be effective. It needs to have, you got to take that pill at 7 in the morning every day for that pill to really be effective. You need to do those sit-ups or that walking on the treadmill by 10 every morning. Otherwise, it affects your metabolism, which then affects your blood sugar, which then affects your energy, which then affects your diet. And there's the whole series. We got to understand with AI what could go wrong. Now, it can go right. Getting it right is easy. It's what can go wrong. And then the connection. We mentioned before that rural America, still 23% of rural America does not have stable internet. Satellite's still pretty expensive. The new stuff that Elon Musk is doing hasn't been rolled out in most of the country. Broadband, you might likely get DSL if you're lucky in some areas on there. Is the Bluetooth compatible with a device for that? And then is the data making it from your device to your smartphone and then back over to the back end, to whatever HIE, whatever cloud you have in there. You got to make sure, because if that drops off and it caches on your cell phone, you might have some wrong data or irrelevant data that gets populated back in the databases if there's too long of a delay or too much corruption in that data get there. So so when you're thinking about programming it, it's easy to think about programming something that says, hey, I need to go from point A to point B. Yes, no, follow the path, do your flow chart. But thinking about what could go wrong is as important as what do you have to capture. So our net result in that was we were able to identify about a 20% compliance rate, which meant that 8 out of 10 people weren't using the stuff right. Either they weren't trained right, they were afraid of it, connectivity problems. But you can imagine if the state of Texas decided that it had rolled out $100 million plan and only 20% of the people using it, they wouldn't get the cost benefits they wanted to. So even those 20 people might have been protected, the 80% of them were still at risk. Plus, they had to still pay for all the extra readmissions back to the hospital. Different kind of bias to look at is what we call the solution bias. And this is the bias of saying, this isn't going to work from the beginning. How you approach using something, I know a couple of you may have some really nice cars and kind of a beater car, and you decide based upon the weather or the time of year which car you're going to drive around. That's solution bias. You've already predetermined that on a nice day in Arizona, like we're getting now, it's time for my convertible, which has been in the garage from middle of May till now because it's been too hot to use it. Microsoft had a really big problem with this with Azure. Azure became one of the predominant cloud solutions for server software application hosting about 7 years ago, after a lot of hiccups getting started, but they really trailed behind in late 2018 behind Google and AWS, and they're basically 4th place. And none of their top customers in the world, so what they call the S400, were using Microsoft for AI. Excuse me. I think you can imagine that it didn't make the bigwigs of Microsoft happy that this big investment, and they're just getting local small IT shops to play with it. How do they get into this market that frankly, Amazon at that time had taken over the NFL and the NBA for their AI. IBM, of course, was doing a lot of medical areas. Microsoft really was losing money left and right. So we did some analysis with them, and they came back and said, okay, let's fix this, and let's fix it fast. So the first thing, one of the things we realized in this is that Microsoft had a weak history of being enterprise ready. Anybody here ever had a problem with a Microsoft product? There you go, Mark. So the Microsoft could take 4 or 5 versions to get something right, and by then they've lost. Hi, Mary. Second of all is relationships. Most companies, even to this day, it's the CIO or the IT director that has that relationship with Microsoft. It's very rarely a COO, a CFO, a CRHO, sales, or the CEO that have that. Well, AI is run most AI projects are being run as business solutions, not as IT solutions. So if you don't have the right people with Microsoft, then you're not going to get the right kind of opportunities in there to see if your solution can do it. Third is they were too tech centric. So most people who were choosing this thought, well, hey, AWS understands business. Microsoft understands technology and understands how to put up a SharePoint system or Microsoft Office 365. But when it came to actually being trusted to make those big decisions, they would want to do that. Which leads to number 4, which we call flop city. Right? Microsoft in the Azure space had only met SLAs less than 60% of the time as of 2018. Some of you probably had Microsoft probably realized you had a lot of outages just on the platform of Azure out there, let alone the other software you've loaded onto it and workflows and those kind of things. And then Microsoft's always known to have a one-size-fits-all, which doesn't work for AI because every business wants to get something out of AI a little bit differently. So if you have to build it all from scratch, that becomes kind of a big deal. Why should I pay big bucks for Microsoft when for the same money I can go to a proven vendor like IBM or to Google or to AWS who has existing clients out there? And this is true across the world, guys. We work with BMW, we work with Reuters, we work with a number of countries across the world. It wasn't just the local IT shop in the back. If you don't believe the software doesn't do it, we found that the programmers and developers who don't believe it actually make more mistakes developing it for Microsoft than they did building something for us because they already believed it had inherent flaws. So it's biased in the beginning, which would almost mandate it to fail versus other ones where they want to see it be a success. There's a lot of bias out there about Microsoft at the time. So we look at Microsoft in 2 ways. Microsoft, one is, what is a technical way to get people with more decision-making power farther up the food chain in the business to recommend giving it a try? And then the strategic part was, how do we use Microsoft to get the IT departments and the developers excited? How do we build a community the way we did back in the 80s and 90s for their certification programs? What can we do to build a community with Microsoft to help make that a reality so they kind of becomes a self-supporting ecosystem within the Microsoft sphere of products and services? So with Microsoft, we ended up having to build an old education program, taking their millions of independent developers across the world to build AI bots. So basically kind of plug and chug predetermined things, that can help them get off the gate quicker. And we started with chatbots because that was a pretty easy, low stress way to do that. And over the last year or so, we built both through LinkedIn Learning and the Microsoft University full certification programs, and then work with these countries on small projects with the conditions that if we're successful, we get to go the next step up. And now Microsoft's number 2 versus number 4 in less than a year and a half from that. IoT bias. So for those who aren't aware, Belmont, Arizona, over by Surprise, thousands of acres of land were bought by Bill Gates and other people to build Arizona's first smart city. There's 26 smart cities across the country, all with different purposes. But the basic idea is, how do we build a self-sustaining, green, low energy, safe place, leveraging technology so our residents can focus on just being human and not having to play with everything. How do we do that? And there's a lot of parts to a smart city, which I'll show you in a second here. So when a smart city is run by devices, so your traffic lights, your HVAC, if you have a lake or a river, right, the boats coming in and out of there, your traffic, your hospitals, your schools, if all they have is components, smart components to run off of IoT, how does AI help that? How can AI come through and help me build my city so it's safer, more effective, and goes where it goes? So you can here's a picture on the right of Belmont, Arizona. And on the left is a picture of their dream for a big city down the road. Probably not the big skyscrapers so much, but the idea of a fully connected location. So as you walk into a building, it recognizes what you like to have for lighting, what you want for temperature, what you need for security, which and where's that line go between doing security versus getting into your privacy? Where are those lines coming through? So a couple of things we had to look at this was, what is the lifeblood of a city? So we knew there's going to be biases because everybody you work with is going to be different. So how do you coordinate sewer, water, power on a smart grid? What happens if the smart grid goes down? What happens if you've miscalculated the flows or thought that somebody wouldn't use a septic or sewer system to the level they are, or the water for that? Communication standards. AT&T is very heavily involved here in Belmont, Arizona, but AT&T has over 35 different standards and protocols depending upon what devices they're using. Well, how do we know those are going to interface properly with other devices necessary for this whole thing to work? Are there mixed mode APIs? What happens if that particular AT&T product was discontinued and you bring a new one in? Is it going to be backwards compatible? Private or public, as I kind of mentioned a little bit before. So we're working with AT&T on this. EMS, traffic lights, power outages, hacking, right? I don't know if you guys read today about how many new things that Iran has apparently hacked into just in the last couple of weeks here in the US. So I'm sure that's all over the world. And China and Russia and every other country trying to do it too. And we're doing it to them as well. It's not just a one-way street. Faulty IO on a device. Certain manufacturers that are suspects, like the Huawei deal with the routers and the cell phones that we banned a couple months back. Data collection. What data can you use? Where do you anonymize that for that? And how does the system anonymize it? Is there any trace left over of that data that was hacked out that somebody can bring back and look at and use that to interfere with that? And then basically the how do you prepare for growth? How do you scale? The biggest thing I think as an IT professional you're going to find, right, is even Cisco's routers after 4 years aren't compatible with the old routers they have. Well, what happens when you have an entire city with millions and millions and millions of different products and IoT devices? How do you keep it all synchronized? When you replace something, how do you make sure that it knows what it's doing and the calibrations were correct, the APIs were correct, so the data is not going to be getting in the way? So here's a typical layout of a smart city. Look at how many things are there, guys. Imagine if you just had one assumption wrong in one calculation for just one piece. I mentioned earlier about your safety. One of our big problems has to do with smart buses. Let's say your smart bus has a failure at an intersection, and you got three choices. You drive through it, you hit a pole, or you hit somebody else's car. How does AI deal with the ethical pieces of whose life gets saved? Do I save the cars and trucks going across traffic by hitting a pole, but then endanger the life of the people in the bus? Do I hit a car to prevent them they don't hit the pole by endanger people in that car that I hit? Where does AI have to come in and play? And then what if its data for calculating was wrong? This is where where AI can get really tricky, because you're making decisions yourself, but you're actually making ethical decisions that may not be ethical for somebody else. So where do you find that fine line for that? And that's still something we're still negotiating right now, because it was never asked before. You know, when a train goes through and somebody hits the train and the train hits it, what do you do? Or air conditioning, right? If I'm sick and I can't handle, below 75 degrees, but I'm the guy coming in and says, I like it at 62. Who has the right of way as far as HVAC in a building?
Hey, Joe, can I just ask a question there? Is there any regulatory body that's looking at those ethical?
They're building them as we speak. FCC's got some stuff going in. A number of public works departments are working on when they want to create some state mandates for that. But the problem is, Simon, if you go to Portland, Maine for theirs versus Minneapolis, it's two different sets of standards at this point. And you go across the world, and I think part of it too is we haven't standardized the equipment. We haven't standardized the role yet of a smart city. We kind of know what we want it to do, kind of in a gray nebulous way, but we don't know for sure what it should do. And really, where does a human take over versus a cop or a policeman or a gas station attendant? Where do we draw the lines? In Portland, Oregon, and I haven't been there all year, and I know what happened after these riots there, but in Portland, they refuse to let the gas stations be run by computer. They're still have to be manned by humans. They have to pay humans an hourly wage to man the gas stations and man the pumps for it. They said, we don't care how sophisticated we get, that's the rules. So how do you, is that something we have to adjust for or program for or not?
Thanks.
So when we look at this, guys, kind of a best practices on a high level, I kind of brought it down to 4 levels here to kind of have you think about it. So you're going to have some business operations leaders. The technical team cannot make those decisions because they don't understand the big picture. Well, they do sometimes, but usually it's more at the director or C-level for that. So your sponsors, your enterprise PMO and consultants need to work together to kind of determine what are the objectives for this and where's the information coming from. Because if you get data from just one side, you might be missing. You need data from failures as much as data from successes. Maybe even more from the failures, to be honest with you, because you're going to learn a lot more from it. You need technicians. You need QR and QA. Understand that workflow and where are the points in that workflow that can stop or start. We want to make sure that we can stop it anywhere, review the data, backtrack back, and restart again if we're getting bad information through there. So we don't want to have happen to us what happened to Amazon for the resumes. We need what I call opinionists. In your organization, you want to have at least 3 different, I made up some words here, these aren't real words necessarily, but we want perfectionists, people who can nitpick and see make sure everything's right. Judgmentalists. I found a great use for that staff that's always negative about things. Well, if they always find problems, this is a good place to be. Let's have them be happy finding problems. And we find they've actually excelled at finding things you never would have thought of that can go wrong. And then they happy-go-lucky like people. These are the people that we just want to get it done, and we're going to have some fun. But you need a different perspective on that, because I found that being positive, being negative, and being happy-go-lucky, you get a totally different perspective on what's working, not working, both in workflow, in logic, and in terms of evaluating data from input to output. And then finally, you need people to understand the details. So once you've got those other 3 groups of people together, you want to kind of look and say, okay, is my algorithm going to be fair? Doesn't matter what tool it is, as I said, but are we accounting for the right stuff? Now, in some situations, if you're trying to protect a certain species of animals or something, you do want to have bias. But in certain cases too, you got the ethics place, just like we talked about here with the buses in the smart city. Create a detailed workflow. Where's every single place that data comes in, data comes out, or there's this decision made. You're going to get to a level of detail you've never seen before on a typical Microsoft project plan if you do AI right. I mean, AI will never be perfect, but you want to make sure that you've at least thought about it and got input from your opinionist teams in every one of those gotcha points that are in there. So now we get to have the fun, guys. we're going to do a real life one that I did a couple years ago for Reuters. For those who don't know, I'm sure y'all do, but I just want to make sure. Over the last 4 years, we have about 10,000 business opportunity zones set up in some of the poor and more challenged neighborhoods across the U.S. and Puerto Rico. So these neighborhoods, there's over $100 billion set up is funding to help entrepreneurs grow a business in these areas and support the local community, and of course hire more people from that local area to help kind of rejuvenate the neighborhoods and kind of build an economy that's not dependent on Walmart or Target or some big company out there. So Reuters want to understand is what type of data do they need to get and understand to understand what kind of business in the African American community would be successful. So we can help help the funders, help those people kind of create a marriage together and have a high level of success for that business. So there's 1,000 bias points, but what I want to evaluate here is really just 4. We're breaking a couple of different groups here, but one group will kind of work back in the next 5 minutes or so and say, hey, Joe, here's some things we got to get for a data. So the data is not biased and we understand what we're working with before we get started. Another group will kind of work on the workflow. So how do we get from getting that data to getting some idea of what that business might be successful with, and what information do we have to process, what kind of decisions we got to make, and that leads into the algorithm, right? What do you think we can put into an AI program versus having humans do it? And then finally, when you have the data that comes out, how do you analyze it? How do you know the data you have that's going to be true? What do we have to look at for that to kind of determine that I'm getting real information that's got minimal bias, so I can move forward with that, with helping those business owners work. So anyway, Stephanie's going to get you set up into 4 different work groups. I'll kind of pop in and pop out of those over the next couple minutes.
And I'm working on getting the rooms all set up right now, making sure none of them are too heavily loaded with just board members like we had the last time.
You're going to name them these titles?
Yes, already done.
Stephanie.
Just double checking really quick. Let's see. One more quick adjustment, I think.
So I think we're going to say 10 minutes or 10 minutes, yeah?
I think that's what we talked about was 10 minutes.
And then each of you assign one person in your group to be kind of the spokesperson to kind of give us your high level answer. There's not enough time to get any details here, but just a general exercise.
All right. Tried to move some folks around. Still might have some heavily weighted in some areas than others. Anyway, all right. I'm about to open all rooms. When I do so, I'm going to pause the recording in the main room. Somebody help me remember to turn it back on when everybody comes back. I'll set a timer for 10 minutes. At 2 minutes before the end, I'll send out a blast to everybody, just letting you know it's about to end. And I will see everybody here in about 10 minutes. And Joe, when you're ready, just leave whatever room you're in, come back to the main room, and I'll push you to the next one. Sound good?
Thank you.
All right. See you guys in a little bit. You guys still left here with me? Are you maybe on mute and actually not here? Can't figure out how to go into the room. Three examples of You're on mute.
Okay, can I go to the data gathering group?
The data gathering, you got it. I will, gotta figure out how to do that. Where'd you go? Okay, I'm going to move you to data gathering. Off you go.
Hopefully.
You should be able to accept. If you go back to breakout rooms, click the little button down at the bottom.
There we go. Got it.
Okay.
That 10 minutes went real fast. Remember, when you come out of a room, you're automatically muted. So if you want to speak.
I think Steph gave us the hardest room possible.
No, I think we had that.
It was automatic. I just kind of shoved some people around just so we didn't have too many bored people in one room.
Nobody was bored.
So we shouldn't take it personally that you gave us the toughest one. Okay, Steph.
It was not personal. Nothing personal.
Probably everybody thought they had the toughest one.
Oh, yeah, that's
Well.
probably true.
All right, Joe, it's back to you. Joe F. Back to you.
Okay. Thanks, Stephen.
You're
So,
welcome.
so the exercise purpose was have you guys kind of see, as Kathy said in the other group there's so many nuances. Once you get the basics, bring it down. So it really requires a different kind of mindset than just typical IT project will create, because it does affect businesses at a different level than most IT projects will. Now, the benefits, of course, are the automation and the hopefully the reduction of errors and whatever else is doing to meet whatever goal it is. But that goal also can be nuanced, and that goal changes based upon who the sponsor is. So thank you for taking 10 minutes of your time. Let's just kind of real quickly go with the leader of each of the four groups and give me a couple second synopsis of what you thought. So let's start with the first group.
Data gathering.
Data gathering. Sorry.
Okay. Well, we instantly got into a discussion because we have to identify what defines an African American business. So there are all those criteria to sort out. Then you get into the discussion of how you define success. Then you realize there's all the corollary data about what type of business it was, so that you'd be able to understand how that applied to the different funding sources. So we instantly felt that this was so huge and complicated that Stephanie had personally assigned us the most challenging room.
Okay.
All our challenging rooms.
Thank you.
This is really hard. Actually, it's hard.
All right, let's go to the workflow leader, please.
Well, we're having a fight over who the leader is. So before I get in more trouble, I'm going to take, it sounded like we were in Kathy's group, because we never got it past what is that kind of a business? What does it mean? Is it an African-American owned business? The name itself could even have a tremendous bias to it. I don't know what kind of business that would be. And so we kind of got stuck with the definition that would be really difficult to do any kind of workflow without knowing what kind of data you'd even be collecting.
And guess what, Daniel? That's exactly the right answer. There is no right, but there's a lot of wrong. And you really gotta understand the purpose of it. And as I was talking with Kathy a little earlier, just identifying the workflow can change. You could have the same kind of business in 4 different places and have 4 different workflows. So what do you want to get out of it, and what kind of data do you want to make decision from? And that depends on your workflow based on how much you want to automate versus how much you want human interaction with that, right? That will drive the data decisions downstream differently.
Cool.
All right, the machine language group. Man.
Machine learning algorithm.
Machine learning, yes.
Am I going to be really naughty and throw Connor under the bus and ask him to be our spokesperson?
Ouch.
Are you comfortable with that, or would you like me to do that, Connor? No problem. I don't mind.
I can talk about the basics of it. So for our situation, we were speculating around the basic idea of potentially a situation where they want to provide more healthy foods for low-income communities. In this case, it would be a specific African-American community. So the data that we talked about we would need would be the spending habits and the buying habits, and potentially something that I thought of personally would be potentially the age, because sometimes age can maybe potentially impact that. I don't know. But Simon, if you have anything you want to add as well.
No, I thought that was excellent. Yeah, I think because we were kind of postulating about it's a two-way street. Okay, do you run algorithms that try to match African American businesses to a particular opportunity zone that would best serve their needs, right, or best serve their demographics? As we know, there's a high degree of loyalty, I think, between African Americans and African American run businesses, right? So, do we want to go that way or the opposite way, right? So, do we want to try to spin it the other way and try to maybe select the right African American business type for a specific opportunity zone that may not be a traditional one? So, but anyway, I thought Connor's point was exactly right. We thought a good actual real world example is how do we get better healthy food to lower income communities, of which African American may be an example, not the only example, but so you could run algorithms that are looking for what is the local area, what are the local food outlets in the local area, and try to match that to a particular opportunity zone, and maybe actually create an opportunity for an African American business to be the healthy choice of a food outlet in that zone that perhaps doesn't have one.
I think, Simon, you can look at too and say, hey, my data source will be multi-tiered. There's no way that Reuters can give me all the data I need to build these things. Where do I go out and get the data? How does the workflow change based on the community and demographics you're talking about there? What are the, because, if I'm going to be in one location, everything that came before you in terms of workflow and data gathering is important, but there's going to be pieces down the road too that you're going to bring in external data that wasn't from the original set. So if I'm going to do an African American grocery store or something like that, there may be a vendor within there that specializes in one kind of fruit or one kind of meat or something like that I have to look at, because they may have their own set of criteria and prejudices ahead of time that affect the whole cycle of my whole store's produce and sales and everything else too. So you get the nuances and can get pretty complex once you keep shaving away a different layer every time. But I think you guys think it's great questions there. It's good stuff. All right, data output analysis group, please.
Well, I'm kind of the one who probably spoke up the most, and we had more of a philosophical discussion about the same types of things that Kathy was talking about with the data acquisition, as it were. And it's harder, right, when you're actually the output group and you don't know what the data is that's going to be collected, right? So we have to speculate, and so I have to be careful about biases, prejudices, things of that sort. But it's ultimately to somebody who's going to invest in a business. So, and then think about potentially what the output, let's just say it's some sort of web page that's going to generate different types of opportunities. And it's going to have to take into consideration, things like buildings, things like, what's it going to take to train people in that community? Is there a need, right? And then it has to constantly evolve, because somebody else may be thinking the same thing and invest in a company that's now being built down the street. And so now, are you going to pull back your funds, right? I mean, there's all of these things that happen. And meanwhile, while all of these other things are going on, somebody may go and say, well, that's really not what this community truly needs. And now you got to change all of your inputs. So for us, I guess it was more, all right, I need a report, right? I need something that's going to say this, because of these particular ideas has the best chance of being successful.
Now, Mark, the one thing and you're exactly right. You can see that. I hope you can see this can be much more complex than a normal business case model, because you're combining technology, and you're combining business needs, but also now you're combining emotions and biases in there. Sometimes your best AI projects start from the end. and go forward versus from the forward, or they go both sides so you find somewhere in the middle where you have a happy medium. The biases of the investor themselves has to be taken into consideration too, but it does affect every piece in that workflow, his or her biases, as well as the entrepreneur's biases, as well as the product or services biases.
But that's true. I mean, that there's a significant bias in if you know what your report or your output is supposed to look like, but then you're going to end up telling the people who are collecting the data, and there's going to be inherent bias in that.
Yeah, I call it the Columbo syndrome from the old TV show, because he had to ask questions and questions, because if he came to a conclusion, then all of his thoughts to getting the criminal would be biased towards getting to that thought he had in his head. He had to try to stay as objective as possible and just be annoying with all the times he asked questions on that. But yeah, well, thank you very much. I hope it gave you guys a little dinky insight in some of the things that the bigger the project or AI, the more thought you have to put into getting it done. But it can be done. It just you got to communicate a little more than you would in just doing a typical rollout of a chatbot. All right, Stephanie, I got 2 screens left, and then I'll let you guys get back to your thing here. So I'm going to share my screen right now.
Go for it.
All right, so thank you for doing that little piece there. Real quickly about my company's based here in Phoenix. We're a boutique AI consulting firm. Probably the biggest growth we've had is in helping you guys think through your AI program. I mean, there's so many great tools that really can shortcut some of the programming time, do it to shortcut the building and some of the frameworks, but it's really about how do we look at this stuff. So whether it's whether we sit back and help you just think about maybe not an easier way, but making sure that you get as many ways as possible to think about what level do you want to break it down, and where do you want to end up. So Mark, as you said earlier, where the input is, but also where Kathy was, where's that? We try to help it get you all that mapped out, and then we'll kind of come in once in a while and kind of look through that. So we've been doing this. I've been doing AI or BI before that for about 25 years. I have 4 guys in our company, so I'm the lead consultant. I have Bill, Pete, and Greg who come in at different points. We talked about the different biases. Those 4 areas are with the workflow, the data output, the algorithm, and of course the front end. So each of us specializes in one part of that to help. I have at the end of this thing, when Stephanie sends you the email, there's one more, much more complex project that we did for Shell Oil, which was from the well site all the way to international foreign exchange market, and all the pieces for running raw crude from drilling for it to when do we sell it in the market and when do we get it refined. That can show you some other ways for AI in there. So feel free to read that. My email address is on this next page here. Feel free to email me. It's sales@AZAI USA, and be happy to help you out for any questions you guys have. We'll also be coming out in the next couple of weeks with our brand new YouTube video series. So every week we'll be talking to experts across the world about how they're running their business better, with a focus and intent on AI as part of that. So there can be an interesting thing for you guys once we have it up. Send me an email, but love to have you subscribe to it, and you get some free advice and some free insight in terms of how other people are using AI to help their business run better. That's all I got on there, Stephanie.
Good. Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. And actually, those are those YouTube things like interview-based YouTube things, or what are they?
Yeah, so there'll be there's 3 on there. So the first couple are going to be interviews with different types of leaders, and it's called Better Business. I actually got that name. Nobody used it on YouTube. So we're going to teach people how to run their business better. Of course, there's a bit of a technology viewpoint because I am, like you guys, a techie at heart. But yeah, the interviews, we'll have a couple where we're just kind of doing some training education about things, like even people just saying, hey, I lost my job because of COVID. Do I want to be an entrepreneur, or do I want to work for the company? How do I reinvent myself for that? And then eventually, if we get a big enough audience, we'll do some live stuff for people can chip in and we can give live answers to.
Right. Yeah, the only reason I mentioned that is that depending on the format, the other Joe on this call, Joe Puz, who runs what's called the PMO Squad, has become very famous for his video channels and interview techniques. So if you're looking for somebody local in the valley to share,
Love to help out. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
tips and tricks, Joe is got an amazing library of this stuff. So he does very well. Okay, excellent. Let me just go back to here. Right. So first of all, thanks so much, Joe. That was really, really interesting. Well, I thought it was really fascinating. I hope the rest of the guys did. I'm sure they did. Really, really appreciate you spending some time with us this evening and imparting what clearly is just the first veneer of this topic. It's obviously huge. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where you would start. So that was excellent. Thanks so much. Really, really appreciate it. Just goes to say, it's going to take a little bit of time to load, so we're going to skip a whole bunch of slides. Anyway, so just want to say thank you, everyone. Really appreciate those who stuck around. I know it's a little late in the evening, but I think that was a great topic. I'm sure it was worth the investment of time. We'll see you again in about a month. We'll learn why Agile and DevOps seem to be competing with each other, and which is going to be very fascinating. So again, stay safe. You know, do be careful. It's getting a little worse out there, so do be careful. But the weather's getting beautiful, so that's the good reason to be outside, right? Well, at least we can go outside, so that's perfect.
Exactly.
Exactly. All right. Well, all the best, everyone. Really appreciate it. See you next time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
That was great. Bye.
Bye.